Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is Eric Bizar. I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And I'm Vice President of Platform Product Management with Salesforce. I'm delighted today to be joined by one of our customer heroes, Mark Warren, who's CIO with the 2020 companies. And our mission today is to give you a real up-close and personal taste of what it's like to build applications on the Force.com platform. 5 times faster than traditional platforms. So big claims. How does it really work? We really want you to get a thorough understanding of what the differentiators are between our platform and traditional platforms. You've probably seen this before. You'll see it many times. This is our safe harbor statement. Just our lawyers would like us to remind you to base any purchasing decisions on features and products currently available and not on forward-looking or roadmap items. And the focus of the session today will be on capabilities that are currently in the platform. Okay, so we've got about an hour. We have a lot of material to cover. I thought I would start by just giving you a quick overview, 5 or 10 minutes, on the scope of the Force.com platform, what it's for, what it does, how it's different than traditional platforms. And then I'm going to spend quite a bit of time building an application right in front of you. The premise that seeing is believing. I can show PowerPoint all day, but you have to really experience what it's like to build an application and what the differences are. That will be a simple application in about 20 minutes or less. Then we'll have Mark come up and talk about an application that his team has developed for 2020 companies. So you kind of get the spectrum from a very simple application in 20 minutes to a real-world application solving real-world business problems that you can learn from. And then we'll wrap up with Q&A. Before jumping in, just wanted to get a sense for the experience of the audience. How many of you are completely brand new to the Force.com platform? How many of you have already built a custom object on the platform? Okay. How many of you have used Workflow? A few. How many of you have built a Force.com site? Okay, a few. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone. We're going to start from the basics and build our way up, but we're going to traverse through the entire platform stack in 20 minutes or less, hopefully. So 5 times faster. How is that possible? What is the difference? We've had a number of independent analysts that have done kind of bake-offs between our platform and other platforms like .NET and Java. And their findings confirm what we had thought, but it was very interesting to see it with real data. And what are the key differences? Well, obviously, with a cloud-based platform, there's a lot of savings in terms of setting up the infrastructure, the hardware, the networking, the data center, all the configuration of those servers for your development, for your testing and staging and production. Huge savings there. But the other source of savings is in the amount of built-in functionality that's available to you with this platform. When you think about building an app, you start by thinking of just a simple data model and throw a user interface on top, and then you're pretty much done. Throw in a little logic in there. But the part that's often forgotten that is a huge advantage with the Force.com platform is above the basic kind of data model UI logic layer, there's all of these built-in services that are not just needed by large enterprise applications. They're really needed by a vast cross-section of all applications that you would want to deploy and manage in an enterprise. So there's the data model, there's the forms and page layouts, and the logic. But then there's workflow. How do you enforce business processes? How do you enforce your business rules that are specific to your organization? There's integration. Oh, wait, you built this application, now you want to connect it with other applications in your environment. How hard is that if you have to build all that from scratch and manage that? Reporting and analytics. Well, now you have all this great data that you're capturing in your application. How are you going to build dashboards and reports and different types of management information to help really get the value out of the application so that you can make business decisions? And then there's security. There's access controls. Having different levels of access based on someone's role or based on a particular scenario. Maybe individual fields or records or entire objects are visible or not, depending on a user's profile. So there's a whole set of security, user provisioning, and access control that's built in. And then for some applications, you want to deploy them to mobile devices, to iPhones, to BlackBerries, and other devices. You may have a need for multi-language applications. How are you going to take your application that was hard-coded in one environment and make it dynamically available to users in different languages? Similarly with multi-currency. So this is really, if I think about the secret sauce of our platform, beyond the kind of cloud-based advantages, this is really a huge differentiator. The second one I want to touch on is the area of customization. And for those of us who have been in the industry for a while, customization was always kind of a dirty word. You had to make this painful choice when you were using an application from a vendor, whether you were going to leave it in its vanilla state and kind of change your business process to fit the application, or you were going to customize the software and know that the next time the vendor came out with a new version, you had to decide whether you're going to reapply your customizations or you're going to just never upgrade. Very painful decisions necessary. The beauty of the way Force.com platform is architected is that there's this really wonderful mixture of the multi-tenancy that gives every customer immediate access to new features as we release them 3 times a year. And your customizations are defined in metadata. They're not hard-coded. And that metadata architecture floats on top of the shared components so that you really get the best of both worlds. You can customize as much as you want. And every release, you get new features, and your customizations continue to work without modification. So that's probably the second thing that I'm most proud of and excited about in our platform. You may have seen this or a version of this in the keynote this morning. Did everyone go to the keynote? How many people went to the keynote? Everyone. Okay. The social thing is so new. Chatter is so new. It's not on my slide. But so I won't go into this in a lot of detail, but we really divide the platform up into the infrastructure layer, kind of the lower level, hardware, software, kind of making things run in the cloud. And then we're going to focus our attention today mostly in this middle level here, which is the platform, the development tools. What are the capabilities to create applications? And we're going to go through the boxes that I've highlighted in more detail. So we're going to build an application. We're going to build a data model. We're going to add a user interface to it. First, a very simple generated form, page layout we call it. And then we'll create a more specialized Visualforce user interface. We'll add a little bit of logic, first in terms of a simple expression called a validation rule, which is based on an Excel-like formula syntax. And then we'll actually paste in some code that I wrote before because I didn't want to type code in front of you. And we'll look at workflow. And then I'll show you how you can take all this, which starts as an internal employee-facing application, and make it exposed on a public website. And the last one down below is the sandbox. What we're going to do is we're going to start our demo in well, we're actually going to do our entire demo in the sandbox environment just to simulate how you would probably want to do things in real life and not do your changes directly in production. So here we go. This is where I wish I had a demo guy to do the mouse move so I could just talk and relax. But what we're going to do here is we're going to build a very simple application. It's a marketing event application. The idea here is you have marketing events like Dreamforce or smaller scale ones, and you want to publish a list of these events on your website. And you'd like to do a separation of the description of the event from the mechanics of getting web pages out there, matching your corporate branding, and so on. So the idea is a marketing person creates a marketing event record. They submit it for approval by a marketing VP, and then once it's approved, it gets published on a website. So that's the idea. Obviously, a very simple application in 20 minutes. Don't be greedy. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a custom object for storing the event information, throw some custom fields on it to look at the event date, the description, approval status. Obviously, in a real application, you would have quite a bit more information. We're going to create a user interface for it. We're going to add a new app to our Salesforce environment that'll appear in the app picker. In the top right corner of the header, we'll create a tab, and we'll create a Visualforce page, throw an approval process on top of that, and then publish it on the site. And I did a little bit of setup before this to save time, but basically we're starting with something very close to an empty org that you would get if you signed up for a new freeforce.com edition org. Okay, so this is Developer Force. If you haven't been here, I highly encourage you to go here, developer.force.com. This is a great repository of information about starting to build apps and advanced techniques, and all of our documentation set is here. This is also where you can go if you want to get a freeforce.com org. And this, if you don't know, it's an org which has up to 100 users. You can build one app. It's free. So this is a way for you, without any commitment, to go and build your first application and experience the value of this platform firsthand yourself before you go into deploying lots of applications and having to get a licensed version. So I actually did this. I set up an org. And now that it's set up, I can just go in and show you. Okay. So when you first log in, there's a lot of resources right here inside your Salesforce org that will help you get started. There's some sample applications. There's a lot of tutorials and so on. So we're going to skip through this. And now this is my environment. This would be my production environment, actually, when I'm done with the app. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for my production environment. And I'm in the setup area here. And I'm actually going to go down and go to a sandbox. The sandbox is my development environment that isolates my changes from production. I've already created a sandbox, so I'm just going to log into the sandbox here. Okay, and I can tell I'm in my sandbox org because it has a special label at the top. Now, sandbox org is created by basically doing a snapshot of my production org and creating it on the side. It doesn't have all the data from production, but it has all the metadata that defines my application. So I'm in this org. I'm going to go back to the setup area in my sandbox. I'm going to start creating my app. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an empty shell of an app. And these are the apps already installed in my environment. An app is just a set of, really at a simple level, it's a set of tabs that go together and provide business functionality. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this Event Force. I've practiced this before, so it's going to fill these in for me. I can give it a custom logo if I like to. I'm going to keep the default here. And I can pick the tabs that are part of this app. So I haven't created my marketing event tab yet, so there's nothing here. But I could add some standard things like reports. I could bring over here dashboards if I want to. So this is just kind of a starting point application. If I hit next, there's some choices here for access control. This is the integrated security model. I can say which user profiles have access to this. I'm just going to turn it on for everyone. Okay, so I just saved this. It's saved in metadata, and the beauty of this environment is that it's dynamic. So now if I go up here, I can see Event Force is now an application in my environment. If I switch to it, I can see I have these default tabs in it. So we've started here. So let me go back. I'm going to open up a new browser tab here so I can toggle back and forth. And now I'm going to create my marketing event object. So you can see there's some objects already installed here. An object is synonymous with a table, a custom table in our database. I'm going to jump in here and create the marketing event object. I'm going to give some attributes like the label. So singular and plural label that will appear in the user interface. There's a name, which is how it's going to be referred to internally for API integration or even programming references. And then there's a number of options here. I won't go through all of these for sake of time. This is an important one. The record name is like its descriptive identifier for each record. And this is going to be an event name. And it's a text type identifier. It could also be an auto number, like a sequence number on a business document. Now, this is where some of these powerful built-in features become exposed. You can see here I can enable analytics, reports, on this object in my database simply by checking this option here. I can also do another data model feature, which is a field-level audit tracking feature, and I just turn that on just like that. And now I can click this option. This is going to take me to the custom tab wizard right after I do this. So I'm saving. I've now actually created a new object, a new table in my database, and now I'm creating a tab. I can go in here. I can pick just a style, a color, and an icon for my tab. I can just skip through here. Here again is the security settings. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but just so you know, it's possible to set security here. And now here's where I decide which applications this tab will be added to, and I'm going to add it just to my Event Force app, and I'm going to save this. Okay. So now if I go back over here in my Event Force app and I hit the refresh, you'll see I now have a tab. So there's my style. here's my event. I can create an event called CloudForce New York maybe, and save this. So with a few clicks, I've created a data model. I've created a simple table. I've created a simple user interface. And I've created an app. Now, it's not a very interesting object right now. So let's go back and add a few more fields to it. And here's my list. I have some standard fields that are automatically added. I'm going to add some custom fields. So this is the custom field wizard. You can see there's a number of different data types that you can add for amounts and text and dates and times and so on. There's formulas. There's actually these lookup and master detail relationships allow you to relate this object to other objects. So this is an important area. I'm going to create a date field for my event date. I'm just going to call it date. I can add some field level help here. You can see there's a number of different options here. I can make it required. So I'm creating the physical data model effectively, and I'm also adding some built-in options here. There's field level security options, and I can add this to my page layout automatically. So I'm just going to do that. All right, now I'm going to add a description field for the event description. I'm going to make this a long text area field. Okay, I'm going to say a description can be up to 4,000 characters, and up to 10 lines of it will be displayed on the page. I want to help text here. I'll leave the default field level security. And I'm going to add this to the page layout, and I'm going to go back and add one more field here. I'm going to add a pick list field with a list of valid values. And for my scenario, I'm going to use this with my workflow process. So I'm going to call this approval status. And this is just a state of the event that's going to be manipulated by the approval process, so not by the user directly. So some of the different states are not submitted for approval, pending approval, approved, and rejected. And I'll use the first value as the default. Okay. So I'm going to, now this one, because I don't want users setting this directly, I'm going to make this read-only for all user profiles. That means it's not going to be editable except by the system. And I'm going to save this. Okay, so a handful of fields. We could go crazy and add a bunch more. But let's go back over here and refresh this page. And you can see now I just manipulated the data model. It automatically updated the UI. And if I edit this, you can see that it's a date field, so there's some built-in functionality. I get a date picker here. I can add a description, learn about force. Okay. And I can save this. And notice the approval status I was not allowed to edit. So this is nice. Let's say I want to change this page layout. I can go to the Edit Layout link here, and this takes me into the page layout editor. I could drag and drop and move my approval status over here, for example. I want my description to be a full, wide field rather than being a two-column field, so I'm going to add a new section here by dragging it down out of the well at the top. I'm going to make it a one-column section. In this case, I'm not even going to show a section header. I just want it to be there to be wide. I have a wide section, and I can move my description field down into my wide section. I'm going to save this. And if you now notice, my changes have immediately gone into effect. So you can get a sense of how it's very conducive to doing iterative development here. You can go quickly back and forth, change things. You're not penalized for making a mistake. You can play, you can explore, and it's very powerful to have that freedom. So next thing I want to show you quickly is how you can add very simple business logic, and this is a validation rule. In this case, what I'm going to do is set up a rule using a formula language that ensures that when you enter an event date, it's in the future. And this is a simple language. If you know Excel formulas, you can figure this out. I'm going to add a field here, and this is going to be the date field. I'm going to insert the date field here. And I want the way these are expressed is a true or false statement describing an error condition. So an error condition would be if the date is before today. So if the date is less than today, and there's a built-in function for looking up today, that would be an error condition. Now I'm going to say an error message to display when that is detected. Event may not be in the past. And I can decide where to put this error message, and I'm going to put this error message right next to my date field. Okay, so there's my expression. Now if I did it correctly and I go back in here and I make this in the past, try to save it, it's going to run that validation rule and give me this error message. So this is a tool you can use to improve data quality and make sure people are following your processes. So let's put that out there and save it. Okay. So a simple example of that. Next thing I wanted to show you is putting the approval process on top of this. What we're going to do now is we're going to go in here into Setup, and we're going to create a new approval process. Approval process, I'm going to select my marketing event object I just created. And I'm going to use the Jumpstart wizard here. And the Jumpstart wizard creates a simplified process with fewer steps and going through details. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call this Publish Marketing Event. So this is my process. I have to pick an email template, and this email template will be used to format the email that's sent to the marketing VP. And here's one I've created ahead of time, just a simple event, email template. The entry criteria are rules that say which records are legitimate to flow into this approval process. And I'm going to do this based on that approval status field that we created. In this case, I'm going to say if the approval status is not equal to pending approval or approved, it can go in here. So I don't want people to resubmit events that have already been submitted for approval in the past or that have already been approved. But if they haven't been submitted yet or they were previously rejected, they can be resubmitted. So those are simple rules there. And now this is a very important part. This is how I decide how that request is going to be routed. And there are a lot of different options here. You can let the submitter choose someone manually if you trust them. You can use it. You can base it on organizational hierarchy. Who is this person's manager? So it can go to their manager by rule rather than by explicit name. It can go to a queue if you have a set of approvers that are authorized. In this case, I'm going to cheat and assign it to myself, which I would not do in real life. Or I would not get away with it anyway. There's other options on whether the approval is the first person that approves it or if you have to have unanimous approval from a set of people. So there's my process. Save that. There's some information telling me what I can do next. I'm in here. Here's the starting point of my definition. So what is this telling me? This is telling me the rules, and the parts of an approval process are what happens when the record is submitted for approval, who does it go to, either one step or multiple steps, and then what happens when the when the approver finally approves it or rejects it, or the last one here, the recall action, is if the submitter changes their mind and decides to recall the submission. So simple structure of an approval process, and then what you can do at each level is you can do a number of different types of actions. So you can create a task, you can send an email, you can update a field, or you can send an outbound message, which is actually like a SOAP message, which is an integration scenario to talk to another system. We're going to do a field update here, and we're going to set the approval status field to a value of pending approval when it's submitted. So I'm going to go down here, pick this field, and I can say set this to pending approval. And I'll save this. Okay. I could do more things than that if I wanted to. I'm going to keep things simple here. So this is the routing. This is saying routing to a specific user. And I'm just going to change the name here. Send to VP marketing. This is just for documentation purposes. Okay. And now what happens when it's approved? So you'll notice it's automatically locking the record while it's pending, and then I have a choice of keeping it locked or unlocking it. I'm going to leave it locked after it's been approved. I'm going to add a new field update here. Set the status to approved. Okay, you get the idea. So I could do other things. I could send an email notification to the submitter saying, hey, this was approved or rejected, and so on. But we're going to keep things really simple for right now, and I won't bother with the rejection action. So this is it. It's kind of hard to figure out what's going on from this view. So if you want to, you can go into the approval process visualizer. And this is a diagram which shows you graphically, if you're used to drawing things in Visio or other tools, you can go through here and you can see the diagram, and as you hover over the shapes in the diagram, you can get more information about what's happening. So you can see here, here's my criteria for submission. It's submitted. When it's submitted, the status is set to pending, the record is locked. Here it's being sent to the VP for approval. I just lost my window. And so you can really flow through here, and this really helps you understand what's going on graphically. And you can also print this and use it for documentation to send out to people. So that is the approval process I've set up. So now let's go back over here to my page here, and let's edit this layout just a little bit more, because it's now a workflow-enabled process. And I'm going to go and add a button here. I'm going to add the Submit for Approval button right here. You can see the approval history related list was added automatically. And now I'm just going to save this guy. Okay, so let's submit this for approval. Oh, you know what I need to do? Let's activate this first. Okay. All right, submit for approval. Okay, so notice a couple things. The status has automatically changed its value, and we have a record down here in the history saying it was submitted to me for approval. Now imagine I was a different person logging into my home page. I could go over here, and I could see that there's an item for me to approve. I could also, if I had a mobile device with email, I could get this notification email. I could actually approve by email by just hitting reply and typing the word approve or reject. I'm going to do that right here and say approve. Okay, so now you can see the record's been approved, the status has been updated. This has all been done with our workflow process without writing any code whatsoever. So kind of cool. So next thing, so we've done workflow. Let's create an alternative user interface for this simple application. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Apex. And I'm going to create a Visualforce page. And I'm calling this Visualforce page event list. And I'm going to type this in here. And it's detected that this page does not exist. So I'm going to say create page event list. And what it's doing now is creating a very simple default Visualforce page. So this is my page. It doesn't say much interesting. I can pop into an inline editor right here and see the code behind this page. And you can see this looks like HTML. Visualforce is a markup-based language. It has a set of built-in tags that begin with Apex colon. But it's markup. It runs in your browser, so you can mix in HTML, JavaScript, Flash, any other web technologies can be mixed in here. The magic of the Apex tags is they are the way you bind to the whole platform. They are evaluated on our server, and they generate a whole bunch of HTML and JavaScript based on rules of our components and our platform behavior. So what I'm going to do now, rather than type in front of you, is I'm going to go to my desktop here. And should have done this ahead of time. So I have a bunch of Apex code that I wrote ahead of time. And I'm going to just copy this in here. Okay. And I'm just going to replace this with this code that I prepared ahead of time. So this Visualforce is something that a typical business user would not be expected to know. If you're technically savvy and you know HTML, it's within reach. But this is really for building professional websites, so some technical knowledge is a good thing here. So I have this code here. If you know HTML, you can probably recognize some HTML tags for divs and things like that. And then there's some Apex tags. And what this is doing is something simple. It's right here in this code. It's just taking a list of events that have been approved, and it's just dumping them out on the page. All right, so if I save this, watch what happens. Okay, So it's looking for an Apex class. What is an Apex class? In this case, the Apex class is it's a controller. If you're familiar with model view controller concepts, it is the glue between the data model and the user interface. It's managing the page flow. It's also where the business rules are found. So I'm going to go back over to create a class for this. Okay. I'm going to go back over here and look at my class that was created. And here's my class. It doesn't do anything interesting right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in some Apex code here. Okay. Wish I could see this better. Okay. What this code is doing is this is doing a query against the database, and it's rather than giving me all the records of the database, it's just giving me the records where the approval status is approved. So the idea here is this is what will control which events appear on my website. So I'm going to save this guy. And now I can go back over here and try to save my Visualforce. Okay. And so what you see up here now is the code that was generated. So there's a little title, and here's the CloudForce New York event that I entered. Okay. So that's nice. The UI is not very pretty. Our ultimate goal is to publish this on our public website, right? So it's important that it have the corporate branding, that it has a nice header and footer. So what I've done here is I'm just going to delete the comments and expose the style sheet for this page. So this is a style sheet that's stored in Salesforce as what's called a static resource. And I have a standard header and footer for the web page that's part of my corporate branding. I have some static content at the bottom and a footer. And when I save this now, you say, oh, look, that looks pretty, but it's got all this Salesforce junk around it. That's no problem. I just say show header equals false here and save it again. And so now I have a nicely formatted page suitable for a corporate website. And if you look down here, the content is coming dynamically from my custom object I just created. So if I go back over here and create a new marketing event for CloudForce London, give this a different date. Say London is in December. It's wonderful. Save this guy. Submit it for approval. Go over here. Approve it. I now go back over here and refresh this page. You can see that we have completed the process. So that's very quickly, in a nutshell, how you can kind of see across the entire platform stack how rapidly you can create an application, you can iterate, you can move forward. And I'm 3 minutes over, so I'm going to switch back and give the floor to Mark. Introducing Mark Warren, CIO of the 2020 companies.
I can't believe you pulled that off.
Mark's app took more than 20 minutes to build.
Yes, it did. A little bit more. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Warren. I'm the CIO for 2020 Companies. And last year, we went through a process to replace the operating platform at 2020. And I'm here today to talk about that. So real quick, agenda, who was 2020, what was the business problem, what were our options, what we built, and then I'm going to insert a little demo in there, and then we'll go back and talk about the benefits. Right, so who's 2020? 2020 is basically an outsourcing company, and they outsource salespeople. So it's a third-party sales organization. The interesting thing about 2020 and the challenge that they face is that there's no off-the-shelf software for sales outsourcing companies. So they're forced to build custom applications. They have no choice whatsoever. And as part of their history, they had tried over and over again to build an underlying platform to help them automate their business, and was rather unsuccessful. And so I was brought in to look at that and to see if we could find an alternative that would help them manage their business much more efficiently. So what was the business problem? We'll start with so 2020 is in different divisions, and our first division that we focused on was retail. Retail was growing at an unbelievable rate. The processes that they used were actually built on top of Microsoft Excel, which, as you might imagine, is not a very good platform for running your business. It got to the point where there were literally hundreds of files floating around. They did have SQL Server. They did build an order entry system. But the developers didn't have time to build all the UIs to help the business maintain the underlying data, so that all went back to IT. It wasn't working. It wasn't ideal. So based on that growth model, the executives at 2020 decided, okay, we've got to do something. This is not working. We have to do something. And so they brought me in to help them go through a process to kind of figure out what made sense, to do an analysis, to determine what the future of 2020 should be. One of the things that was very important and that I'm a very big believer in is that it is up to IT to justify things, okay? Things don't justify themselves. So you must be able to do math for the benefit of the executives that need to make that decision. So what we did was to go through a rather deep analysis that included risk analysis, cost analysis, time to market. At the time, we were very new to the platform, so we brought in Salesforce Professional Services, one throat to choke, I like to say. And we were able to then to help the company make a good decision. Okay? We were able to help them understand. We were able to present to the board, and we were able to do so in a way that included the math, included the justification, included all the business benefits. And then additionally, a gentleman by the name of John O'Neill, who's the EVP of retail, stood up there and said, and oh, by the way, I'm willing to step up to the return that 2020 will see. That return was based on sales performance if I can get this technology, if I can get this solution, this system. So really, my point there is that it's just very important for IT to partner with the business, and it's very important for IT to understand the metrics and the model that underlies that in order to get applications justified, in order to get projects justified, which we did. So what solutions did we explore? Well, Force.com had been in and talked to John previously. The sales guys for Salesforce.com had been there. And he really liked the whole concept of Force.com. Executives were not so sure. The IT guys were very sure that it was a bad idea. Okay, just so we're clear, it was a bad idea to go with Force.com. Because they like .NET. They like SQL Server. They like their toolkit. They like their model. They like all the things that were very close to them. The problem is that they hadn't been successful to date. It would have been a different story if they had been able to get .NET, C#, SQL Server to develop and deliver a solution, but they hadn't, which is why I was there. So we did a rather deep dive analysis. One of the things that was kind of interesting is we got 2 consulting companies to bid the project, one in .NET and the other being Salesforce Professional Services. So it was kind of an independent analysis, and it really helped us to best understand what it is that we were going to get and how much it was going to cost and how long it was going to take, because these guys were stepping up with fixed bid projects. So here's a solution comparison. This is the actual slide that we put in front of the board. This was part of our board deck. You'll notice the first option, we called that the status quo, and kind of the funny thing there was the time to solution was never, the risk profile was not viable, and the long-term potential was not viable. Basically what we said is, okay, if we keep going the way we're going, we're never going to get there. And we know we're never going to get there because we've been trying for a few years now and we haven't gotten there. So, if nothing changes, then definition of insanity, nothing changes. We also looked at .NET. Basically, that called for an expansion of the development team from 3.5 FTEs to 8 FTEs. And we looked at the associated costs with that. We did a 1-year and a 3-year model. You'll note that we did everything, and where the real numbers are the net to status quo. That was the budget that was in place. That's what 2020 was spending, and that line is what the board really focused on. How much more money is it going to cost me to get this solution? Came in at 6+ months, even with 8 FTEs, risk profile very high, and a long-term potential very low. So we basically decided that, hey, you know, the .NET C# platform does not make sense for a company the size of 2020 companies. It doesn't make sense to hire that many developers. It doesn't make sense to field that development team. 2020 companies is basically a bunch of sales guys, so they don't want to talk about technology. So then we looked at the Force.com platform, and we were very pleased to see that we could bring that in at a budgetary number that was very acceptable, that we could bring that in very quickly. Retail was, you know, getting ready to double again in size, so it was very problematic if we weren't able to deliver quickly. And then also, again, the risk profile, looking at it, is very low. Risk is code. I want you to remember that. It's something I truly believe in. The amount of code that you write is equal to the amount of risk that you have in the system, because code is complexity. Code is time. Code is money. Code is the issue. So by using, you know, an 80%, 90% point-and-click model, we were able to dramatically reduce the risk, dramatically reduce the time, and get there much more quickly. Also interestingly, we looked at a hybrid model. 2020 has a lot of field reps, hundreds of them, actually thousands. And so what we looked at was said, well, maybe what we'll do is we'll buy seats for all the management on Salesforce and on Force.com, but then we'll build a website. You know, that'll be cheaper because we won't have the license costs associated. But when we looked at that, again, we ended up where the net cost, it didn't make sense. It made sense to buy everybody a seat. And also that, you know, that profile in terms of long-term potential meant that we're still stuck with developing in C#, developing on .NET, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, you know, we pitched it to the board, we pitched it to executive management, and the project was approved. That was in March of last year. We started construction in April, and we launched in August, went live and in production in August with a system that now underlies all of retail. Every single dollar that flows through the retail operating division flows through the Force.com platform. This is kind of a process model, process list. You'll note that we integrated with ADP. The original integration with ADP was we send a file, an Excel file, and then they'd rekey it, which was, of course, not very cost effective. We use Pervasive Data Integrator, which is an excellent tool, which I highly recommend to help with process automation. We exchange a lot of files with clients, so we need ways of getting data in and out of the system and doing that in a very high volume and a manner that you know, allows us to kind of sleep at night because the robot wakes up and does all that for us. But you'll notice that everything surrounds the Force.com platform. Again, this dramatically reduces the complexity of what is, in effect, an ERP platform for the retail division. All right, so let's switch to a demo. Now, how do I get to the screen here? Hit escape. What's that? Sorry, I'm a PC. All right, we're good. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with the Force.com platform, the one thing you really, really, really need to know is that a sandbox is required. You cannot build on the platform without one, so just so you know. So I've logged into the sandbox. I refreshed this yesterday, and you'll notice that there are a huge number of tabs on here, and this is my preference, okay? I like having everything flat. The admins in the group, The admins in the group don't, so they went and they built their own little admin app so that they can just see the tabs that they want to see for editing core data. But just a note that, based on the login, and you saw with Eric's demo, you choose what tabs belong to what apps, and you can create an unlimited number of those as well. So I'm going to go and switch to setup and go to users, and we're going to do, we'll start out, we'll show you the retail. So you see here, one of the cool things about the sandbox, excuse me, one of the cool things about the sandbox is I can log in as anybody to see what they see. So I can test going through all of my applications and test all the roles and profiles I've created. But let me go ahead and log in as a rep. Notice that the number of tabs now is dramatically reduced because reps only enter data. Important concept to understand, and to a great extent, the point-and-click nature of the Force.com platform dramatically reduces the amount of code that you create, but you're still building software, especially if it's an ERP. So, you can't point-and-click your way all the way through. I mean, we have, I'd say about 1,000 lines of code in the system, and that compares to the tens of thousands we would have had if we had done it in C#. But the reps in the 2020 model are responsible for underlying transactions. The administrators maintain all the core data, the kiosks, the people, the markets, the regions, all the data that surrounds the operation of the organization. But the reps are responsible for transacting the data directly. So as an example, they're going to go into their time tracker. As you might imagine, there's, these reps are sitting in a kiosk. And earlier today, I punched in for this particular rep. I'm just testing this morning, make sure everything was okay. And I punched in for this particular rep. So now I can come in here and punch out. So we built this completely custom time clock system built into Salesforce that's shared. The reps have one computer in the kiosk, and they take turns, they log in, they clock out, they update their data. Now, when you talk about time data, one of the things that you have to realize is that different states have different rules for timesheets, okay? What constitutes overtime, what constitutes holidays. We took all of that logic and embedded it in Apex, in code, and that sits behind here. So the reps just go in and clock in and out. The system automatically builds a timesheet for them that once they approve that timesheet, it calculates how much overtime they have, it calculates how much regular time they have, and it calculates how much double time they have. In addition to that, the system is keeping track of all of the revenue that's being generated and all of the payroll that's being generated. So I can go in and do a cost of goods sold analysis on a real-time basis at any time. I can trend that, I can see that as it relates to the time data. What I can also do, though, is go into my sales tracker, go into my activity tracker, and you'll notice, I'm going to go into my activity today, and you'll notice that there's no new button here. In a standard UI, native UI, there'd be a new button right there. Well, what we did is said, we don't really trust the reps to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to automatically create an activity for them the first time they punch in. That also allows us to know who hasn't filled out their activity, and that's kind of part of the problem. If you ever manage a bunch of sales guys, it's like herding cats. So then I can come in here and I'll go and fill out my activity tracker. And again, this was automatically created for me when I punched into the Citrus Spark kiosk today. Then next I'll go into the sales tracker to enter my orders. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about Salesforce and the native UI is that it does have limitations, okay? When Eric went and built his object, it automatically generated a UI for it, okay? The great thing about that is the last thing developers do when they build tables is create a UI to admin that table, right? So in the previous system, there was no UI. The admins had nothing, right? They had to go to IT to get them to change the tables. It was horrible. So what Salesforce allows us to do then is to automatically generate all those. Those were all free, right? So managing regions, managing core data, managing markets, managing people, onboarding people, all that is handled automatically with the UIs that were generated and then given to the admin staff. However, if I go in and I look and I want to create a new order, in this case it's a sales tracker, you'll see that this particular sales tracker uses a very flat interface, okay? Notice that there's a field named FiOS, a field named HSI, order types, backup. What this is a giant blob, okay? Well, giant blobs are great for UI, for people who want to enter quickly, because it's all, it's a form. It looks just like the form that they fill out when they're serving a customer. So it's really easy for them to enter orders. Well, the problem with blobs is you can't process them very well. So this UI on this object is great for data entry, horrible for processing. So here's what we did. So I'm going to log out. I'm going to go fill any of this out. So I'll log out as this guy. And now let's go log in as a general manager. So I'll log in as a TIEF. Now I'm logging in as a general manager, and you'll note that my UI is different. My pages are different. I have a dashboard. I have more data. I have more tabs. I have more things that I have to do. But now let's go into orders. And we'll run, let's do orders this week for Verizon. See, it's a little bit the incredible high volume of orders that run through the system. And then let's go and click on this guy, and you'll notice that the order in its in how it's processed through the system is dramatically expanded in terms of the number of fields. And oh, by the way, it's actually implemented in a parent-child relationship, a master-detail relationship, which is what you need for processing orders. So how do we do that? Well, a very, very, very few lines of code sit behind the system, sit behind that sales tracker tab that the rep uses, and there's another object that does a lookup. It's the product catalog that does a lookup that says, when I'm entering in this field, I should use this product and create this detail. So here's the detailed data. In addition to that, I have to do a great deal of processing to match orders. I reconcile them. The orders are double entered in the client system as well as mine, so I match those up to make sure that when we send those in for validation, we're going to get paid, and that, we know what that revenue is. The rep knows that that order was approved, and that can go forward. But really just trying to point out that although you do run into issues with the native UI, and you do have to dip down, if you will, at times, still the amount of code necessary to do that dipping down is very, very small relative to having to create all of this in a Microsoft.NET type of environment. Another thing that was really important for 2020 is excuse me, what's called a downline view. So basically, when you sell as a rep, you roll up to a general manager, you roll up to a regional manager, and you roll up to a vice president that sits over that particular campaign or that contract or that relationship with that client. So it was very important to maintain the downline view, do that automatically, but also protect reps and GMs from seeing each other's orders, right? So we implemented a private model that then allows us to go in and I can say, let me look at performance claimed last month. And this is all specific to me as a general manager. Those are all of my markets and my kiosks. Well, all I had to do when I wrote that report is just say my. That's it. So again, very powerful underlying tools are built into the system that have evolved from Salesforce spending so much time solving problems for customers, and then we're able to easily take advantage of it. I just want to show you one more thing. So we'll log out again. We have just completed or recently completed implementing door-to-door. So now our second operating division is done. We'll have business-to-business done within the first quarter of next year. At that point, every single dollar of revenue and payroll that flows through 2020 companies will flow through this system and through the Force.com. But we had this really weird problem with UI. Let's see, Damien. So long as Damien. Where the general managers enter activity on behalf of their reps, and they do it in an Excel worksheet. Well, I'm sorry guys, but there is no Excel worksheet UI in the Force.com platform. Fortunately, we built our own. So what we were able to do is build this activity tracker. Now, what this is going to do is dynamically populate in an Excel worksheet type format based on data. This is completely dynamic. So the fact that this team shows up here as Tampa 07 is because this general manager is over Tampa 07. The fact that these reps show up as these rows, creates these rows, is because those reps are in Tampa 07. And then we created our own little metadata object to describe the columns that should show up based on the campaign. So now my admins can dynamically build one of these for any campaign as it comes online. So we sign up AT&T tomorrow, and we'll have one of these built tomorrow to track the reps. No coding necessary, no developers involved. The administrators in the business manage that themselves. So I just really wanted to point out that although there are cases where you can't point and click your way to a solution, when you do dive down, there's not a lot of code. This took our developer 3 days to build. To me, that's just absolutely amazing. So what this means for us is a complete transformation, really, of the business, and actually what is turning out to be a complete transformation of IT. And what it's actually turning out to be is a complete transformation of the relationship between IT and the business. Because the frustration that the business felt previously is gone. When the CEO brought me on, the first thing he said was, success is defined by us not talking about IT and executive staff anymore. We were able to accomplish that. Well, I just realized I'm running long. I was thinking, I got a couple minutes left.
I was going to show you how to bring up PowerPoint again.
Q&A. Let's do a quick benefit, and then I'll
Sure.
have at least a couple minutes to do the... Okay, some of your benefits. We solved an immediate business need. Okay, it had taken years to try to solve an immediate business need. That didn't happen. We solved it in 4 months. Project launch to construction to production in 4 months. Senior management determined that the solution was warranted. The investment was warranted. They were very worried about the risk, but if it paid off, they were good to go. We got the project funded. An internet-based development platform and a highly cost-effective solution. These reps are all over the country, sitting out in kiosks. Had to be internet-based. Couldn't be client-server-based. We don't even have access to the laptops that they use to enter these orders. We reduced headcount in IT, and more importantly, we reduced headcount in the business, where all these people are manually manipulating data and spreadsheets. No longer have to do that. It's much more exciting for the ones that have stayed and much more effective. Reduce the risk of failure. Again, very important to 2020, and now we're on target to move everything. All divisions. This is actually we're slipping now. We're out to probably this February, but Just to close, just want to say that we proved it. We did it. We built an ERP that runs a $120 million business, everything, on the Force.com platform. And to me, that was just wow. I mean, there were so many people who said we were never going to do it, and we couldn't get it done, and we did it. So hope that helps and helps everyone better understand what the platform's capable of. Thank you. We got like a couple of minutes for Q&A?
Yeah.
Just a couple.
Can we just wrap up points? So hopefully we've shown you how we get that 5 times faster from all these built-in services. A lot of clicks, but there's code when you need it. This is a really impressive story. I think Mark's story is terrific. Fantastic success. Key call to action for all of you is that everyone in here, if you haven't done so already, you can go and either create a free Force.com edition environment, or you can have 100 free Force.com user licenses added to your existing orgs for Salesforce, so you should all do that. There's other sessions, all kinds of sessions today and tomorrow and Friday to go into more detail on these different subjects. We can do a couple questions if everyone has questions.
Out of time.
People are outside. We'll stand over here on the side. If anyone wants to come up and ask a question, feel free to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.